Welcome back to Refit and Sale. My name's George, Sid the Solent Boat Butler. This is a Contessa 32 from the mid-70s. It's Project Lottie, if you've been following along. I have got the owner with me today to ask him a few questions, because during the refit I've been asked many questions about the refit, the boat, and certain elements of the refit, and I thought it would be great if you can ask your questions directly to him. So I have a list of questions. Thank you for those that sent them in, which I will be posing. Before I do that, I'm going to give you a quick look around the boat, a quick overview of the refit so far. I've not done any recording for a couple of weeks, and lots of stuff has been happening kind of in the background. So we'll start with an overview, and then onto the questions with Jamie. So let's start the project update down here. You can see below the waterline, that is the finished epoxy barrier coating that has been on the hull. If you've seen the earlier videos, you'll know the boat has had a full osmosis treatment. So hull was peeled, lots and lots of blisters uncovered. I then dried that with heat and vacuum, and then re-laminated a layer of glass over the entire underwater hull, and filled and faired and made the hull as perfect as I can. In fact, realistically, I would say it is better than new, because I'm also faired out some dimples that were in the hull from its original manufacture. So whilst I was doing that, I've also fitted a central line, or a centre line transducer housing there. Most of the seacocks got glassed up because they are being moved around or being put in slightly in a different position. The ones that have remained in the same position are back here. So there are two cockpit drains either side in their standard position. They are Blake's on the inside. The engine inlet seacock has been moved to a more sensible location, so that is there. You can see it's all been nicely faired in, because racing boat. Also below the waterline, she has had a new stern tube put in. So the old stern tubes were bronze. This one actually had a stainless steel one that was fitted, I think 10 or 15 years ago. Looking at the history of the boat, that was also leaking. So glassed in a GRP stern tube. There's the new cutlass bearing. There is a brand new prop shaft to go in there as well. So that is all good. Whilst I was also doing repairs, there was some damage at the back edge of the keel here, some slight cracking, delamination. That has been repaired. And then there was quite a big area of repair down at the front here of the keel. It obviously had a pretty big impact there at some point, and I had to do a fairly large glass repair there. So underwater, she's basically like a new boat. So that is all good. Above the waterline, the top sides did get an initial polish when I got the boat out, an initial clean up. It's gotten very dirty and a bit streaky because that was some time ago now, but at some point I'll give that another polish and a wax, and that will come up looking pretty good. There are a few dings in the hull. It's not perfect, but the owner has decided that he can live with those for now. He is going to be kind of finding his way, finding his sea legs with the boat and learning along the way, and possibly adding a few scratches along the way. So he's sensibly taken the view that he is not going to do too much beautification of the top sides at this stage, and that might be something for another time. So let's go up the top, come on deck, and we'll show you what's been going on there. Right, up on deck, all the crusty old windows have been replaced with brand new ones. So I did a video about that you will possibly have seen. So 8 brand new windows, and while I was at it, it's had 2 brand new hatches fitted. Fitting those hatches hasn't yet been put on the channel, but it will be. But it was slightly more of a faff than I had anticipated, just because of some damage in the join between the deck and the headlining, but it's all been kind of repaired and re-gelled, so that will be the subject of a future video. I have removed all the tow rails, as you can see. I did that in an earlier video, I think. So they're all off, and I'm going to be making up some new ones to go all the way round. Handrails as well are also going to be coming off, but they haven't come off yet, but I'm going to be replacing them with new ones. The deck has been adorned with some new jewellery, so I had to do some GRP repairs, sorry, some gel coat repairs, but I have replaced the U-bolts. So that's the cap shroud U-bolt and then that's the aft shroud U-bolt, forward shroud U-bolt, same on the other side. Again, I had to do a whole bunch of gel coat repairs in the upstand that the tow rail sits on, and also around some little minor cracks around these. In fact, I don't think I did that one. Which one did I do? I did about 3 of them, I can't remember. I think I did that one over there actually. Kind of re-gelled to cover up a load of cracks on that one. Haven't yet done the cockpit teak, but it is all kind of ready to do. The recesses have all been filled, and when I get round to it, I'll be templating and making up some teak decking with not actual teak, but a teak alternative. So that is yet to do, but I've been holding off doing that because I've been coming up and down onto the boat so much as I work on the inside. So we're inside the boat now, and on the floor there you can see that is the new kind of subfloor. Again, earlier video you will have seen that I pulled the old floor out, pulled the old water tank out, then cleaned everything in there because it was disgusting, and put in some new mini bulkheads down there, fitted a new stainless steel water tank, and then a new subfloor down there because it is going to get a kind of decorative teak and holly floor made out of solid wood put down on top of that. But I've been holding off doing that. I've got the wood to do it, but I've been holding off whilst I've been doing some other works in here. So on the port side, I've rebuilt the kind of hull strengthening in there, put some additional structure in there because there's a potential weak point in there. I've done lots of rebonding of failed secondary bonding around the boat, particularly around the main bulkhead there, around the main bulkhead there, and kind of like the galley bulkhead. There was a bit of secondary bonding failure in there, but all these lockers are all kind of beautiful inside now. If I lift that new bunk board up, you can see how that looks. So it's all very tidy and neat, apart from kind of a bit of leftover dust. New locker tops everywhere, so they've all been custom made. The lockers above have all been painted. All the interior woodwork here has been stripped. It's all been sanded. It's all been prepped, and my next job after making this little video is to do some varnishing in here, and it is going to come up really nice. So this is 50-year-old teak, and I think it's going to look lovely. I've still got a little bit of sanding to do, so around the hatch there, that still needs a bit more stripping, stain removing and what have you, but we're getting there. Up the quarter berth, I have removed the old and then built a custom battery box for the new AGM battery. So you can see the 2 house batteries there, and just behind there's a slot here. That is where the starter battery is going to go. The starter battery is, I can't see it now, but never mind. That's all been painted out up there, but first I put in that piece of wood there, this strip of wood here, to support new bunk boards, because these this quarter berth and many of these bunks had lee cloths underneath them, or lee boards. Yeah, lee cloths, so they kind of sagged in the middle. It's kind of the old school way of doing it on boats, and we wanted to put bunk boards in, but it's looking tidy up there. All that side lining wood sanded up and looked really nice, so everything has been painted in there. It looks really tidy. If you'd seen the earlier videos, you also saw all the work that I did in the engine bay. So the engine's been out off to the workshop, everything's been lined and cleaned. There's some interior lighting in there as well, which currently isn't wired in. Does work, I've tested it. So that engine should, once it's all plumbed back in, all fire up and work well. Some of the interior woodwork, as you can see, the drawers, locker fronts and what have you, that is all around the workshop because that had its first coat of varnish yesterday, because the more stuff I can take off and do in the workshop, the better, and then it can all be refitted. These windows do look lovely on the inside compared to the old ones, which were crusty and horrible. That's made a massive difference, and at some point I'll get a video up about the hatches, but I had to basically repair all of this around here and kind of re-gel coat everything, so it all looks super nice, almost like a new boat, which is what we're going for. Up forward, it is a bit of a disaster area. So in here there used to be a heads unit, and you can see That's where the seacocks used to be. Now that is just kind of like a temporary fill I've done on the inside so that when I was doing the bottom, I could do the laminating of the repair on those old seacock holes. So I've got to grind that out and do the internal laminating just to finish off those repairs, because we're going to be putting seacocks back in a different location. That has all been ripped out by the owner. Well done, Jamie. And there's all the shelving and stuff which hasn't quite made it into the bin yet. The woodwork up there has been partially stripped. That floor is going to come out. We're going to lower the floor very slightly, which means we can fit the seacocks ever so slightly lower down is the plan. Opposite the heads is the hanging locker, which has been emptied out. It's got the U-bolts in there, you can see, with nice big backing plates. That has all been painted and it's all kind of ready, really. That's kind of finished. I just need to do the varnishing of the wood trim that goes all the way around. Up and about, the locker has been sanded, does need to be painted, but I'm holding off doing it because there is a bit of failed secondary bonding on that bulkhead. You can see right ahead there, so at the top where the bulkhead is tabbed into the deck, that's all come a bit loose. I'm hoping the bulkhead is going to be usable. I don't think it's too soft, but the bonding needs replacing. There's also a vent up there, possibly can't see it, but right in the middle on the centre line there is an air vent, and it's a stupid place to have an air vent. They didn't put them there on the later boats, and I've glassed them up before on these boats, and that's what we're doing on this boat. So there's going to be a small deck repair, and I'm hoping the wood that is in the deck there's some wood core, just some strengthening kind of stringers in the deck there. I'm hoping that is not too wet. I don't really want to cut it all out and replace it, but I will see when I get to it. But I don't really want to do too much grinding until I've got at least 2 coats on all this varnish work in here, because it will seal the wood and it will stop any dust that I create getting kind of into the grain of the wood. I think that's probably about it for an update. The galley is yet to be done. There's no cooker in there. I have some Corian, so I'm going to be making a Corian worktop there, putting a sink in there, building a new fridge box to go in there because this one is quite small, so I'm going to make a much larger fridge. New locker fronts in there, teak place, plywood fronts I think we're going for. But yes, again, subject of another video. Well, I think that's enough of an update. You can see lots of work has been done, but there's lots of work still to do. So I've still got to do all the wiring. The battery boxes and the batteries are there, but there's no cabling whatsoever. I've stripped out all the old stuff. I've labelled the stuff that I've got to reuse. So some of the lighting cables that run through the headlining, what have you, I have to reuse those. The mast wiring will get all new wiring run to the base of the mast, and the mast manufacturer is going to be running the cables in the mast down to the base. So that's all sorted, and we'll just need connecting up. I've got all the instrumentation to go in, chart plotters, AIS, blah, 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 loads and loads of stuff. New upholstery isn't quite on order, it's just in the process of being organised, but the boat's getting all new upholstery, and there's an awful lot still yet to do. So I'm going to stop filming and crack on, and you can now watch the interview with Jamie and myself answering your questions. Well, I have great pleasure in welcoming along Jamie, who owns Lottie, and if you have watched some of my previous videos, you may have seen him in the odd one peeking around the corner, and certainly if you watched the most recent bungalow racing video, you will have seen him in that. And I'm very pleased to say that he's a client, but he's also become a friend. He's a really nice guy. So, hello, Jamie.
Hello.
Welcome to your boat.
Thank you very much.
And you're actually on film on Lottie, which is going to be interesting. Right, I have got a list of questions. So I put a video out a few days ago saying I'm going to be doing an interview, and do you want to send in your questions? And I've been sent quite a few questions, and Jamie's sweating a bit.
Yeah.
I think.
Let's do it.
With answers. So let's go and find these questions. Right, first question. This one is from John Elliott. Thank you very much for sending that in. I appreciate all the really helpful advice coming our way from the SBB. That's no problem. I'm happy to help. A question for the lucky owner. It would appear that you plan some serious use of your reborn boat. Do you feel that the fresh water and fuel capacity is sufficient for your purposes,
or do you plan to add some auxiliary tanks or jerry cans? I should add that this question comes from a Nick 32 fan. So that's a Nicholson 32 sailboat, which is the same length, heavier displacement, long keel, if you're not familiar with them, but kind of a similar era boat. Fuel and water capacity. What are your thoughts, Jamie, for your intended use?
I think obviously the capacity on the fuel tank and water tank isn't as great as it is on more modern boats, but I think it's a fair trade-off for its seaworthiness. And there's always the option of adding extra tanks up in the forward cabin, or carrying jerry cans, as he says. But I think when I was looking for a boat, it wasn't particularly high up on the priority list in terms of how big the fuel tank was or how big the water tank was. Those were sort of bits that came, well, worry about those later. Just get the right boat and make do with everything else, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's fair to say for any boat you buy. There are always compromises to be had from whatever boat you ultimately get. But some of those compromises can be ironed out. More tankage can be put in, but then that's done at the expense of locker space potentially. So it's just how you want to do it. When I went cruising on my Westerly, it's got a pretty big fuel tank, but I ended up doing what many cruisers do and strapping plastic fuel cans to the deck, and water cans as well, actually. So that gave me a bit of extra range when I felt as though I needed it for longer ocean passages. Right, thank you very much. Hope that answers your question, John. Next question is from Ricky T. One day ago. If I'm not too late, no, you're not too late. You're okay. Question to the lucky owner. Would you consider taking George along to film the launch and a shakedown sail? After watching the works, it would be awesome to see her in the water. Well, I'm going to try and answer that question. Whilst it's not legally binding, I have sort of said, I really want to make sure that I can go out for a sail, shakedown sail, win your boat, Jamie. So yeah, over to you, Jamie.
Yeah, I think it's probably quite a nice thing for you to do, having worked on the boat for such a long period of time. You've probably, I don't know, you've probably got a little bit attached to the thing as well and rebuilt it from the kind of the ground back up, so it would probably be quite a nice thing to finish off the project. And yeah, it's probably quite satisfying from your point of view, I think.
Yeah.
But there might be some things in the pipeline. So
there might be, yes. So yeah, no, definitely I'm going to be filming the launch. I'm definitely going to be filming the first sail or two. So I'm really looking forward to that. And as Jamie said, he's absolutely right. I actually do get a little bit attached to the boats that I work on because particularly when it's Contessas, because I do have kind of a long-standing relationship with them, and when you put so much work into bringing something back up to a standard that the owner wants, then you do put a little bit of yourself into them, and it's a bit like letting go of one of your children. I've been involved in a few larger refits and lots of small refits, and definitely on the big ones it is like, oh, okay, it's going now. This boat's been in my life for a month or 2 months or 3 months or 6 months or however long it is, and then you spend a lot of time with it, and then you release it into the wild and hope that it does well, a bit like a child. Right, next question from I'm going to murder your name, I'm really sorry, Mr. Kolipololos. Sorry, that was probably awful. I'm wondering if it is worth to have a boat that is so old. Do you feel safe, or maybe better to get something new? Thanks for the videos, it's fantastic. No problem on the videos. Is it worth buying a boat that's so old, Jamie?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I think, I don't know, I could talk for hours about why Contessa 32, I suppose, but I don't know, how do you best...
Is it worth buying a boat so old? If it's what you want, then yes. I mean, you can go out and buy a brand new Contessa if you want to. They are not cheap when you compare them against modern production built boats in a factory where they're just stamped out, 10, 20, 30 boats at a time, because they are hand built one-offs. So they are always going to be expensive. And if you want that sort of boat, then you've got that choice. Do you go and buy a brand new Contessa, or do you go and buy a used but really good Contessa if you can find one, or do you go and buy a slightly older Contessa and then do some sort of refit to bring it up to the standard, whatever that standard may be for you or your budget. And those are the kind of options if you want this particular model of boat. Obviously there are newer designs out there. Are they safer? Are they better? Well, that is just a matter of opinion. But if you want a boat with this sort of classic looks, then your options are much more limited, certainly if you want to buy a new boat. You can probably go and buy a brand new Rustler 36, which is a kind of a similar era boat, similar sort of style boat, has a little bit more internal volume, but has its own set of compromises, I guess. And, you know, there are Spirit Yachts and people like that that build absolutely beautiful boats, one-offs, but they are phenomenally expensive. But you know, there aren't that many new boats that you could go out and buy that look like a Contessa and sail like a Contessa. I'm not sure that really answers your question, but I think you've got two Contessa fans here, so it's going to be quite difficult to say if it's worth it or not, because I guess I think it's worth it because I love them. I own one, I've sailed one all my life. Jamie thinks it's worth it, and that's why he's spending the money.
I think there's so many, when I was looking, to go slightly off topic, I think when I was looking at which boat to buy, there's plenty of stories and tales of people sailing Contessas from to the end of the earth and back. And I think there's probably a lot of people that would argue that they'd much rather do that in a Contessa than a modern production boat. Most of them anyway.
And the other boats you looked at were kind of similar, classic-y shaped boats,
I looked at Rustler 31, which was quite nice, but it looked a bit more old, if that's possible. And a Baltic 33, that was quite nice, but it was a bit more expensive.
And that larger Swan.
And the Swan 40, which I kind of fell in love with, but it would have just, it wouldn't have been the right thing, I think, for a first boat. But they are very nice.
They are very nice.
They are very nice.
Right, let's move on. Hope that answers your question. Possibly not, but you know, we're just going to chat, and hopefully this is an interesting watch. We'll see. What criteria were you looking at for in a yacht? Which is similar to the last question, maybe slightly. What criteria were you looking at for a yacht that led you to buy a Contessa 32? That was from Stuart Bailey, 5665. Thank you very much, Stuart. Over to you, Jamie.
Yeah, I think when I was first looking a couple of years ago, I basically had a budget that I wanted to spend on the initial boat, and essentially I did hours and hours and hours and months of research, scrolling through Yacht Market and various other sites to try and find something that I quite liked. And I kind of figured out that for the money I wanted to spend, the Contessa was probably the best bet. I think I was looking for something that I wasn't going to outgrow relatively quickly. So people have said, oh, why didn't you buy a 20-foot bilge keel boat to start with? Which is possibly a reasonable suggestion if you're just learning and you don't have any grand plans. But I wanted a boat that I probably knew I was going to get carried away with, that in theory I would never have to upgrade or change for the sailing that I wanted to do. So future-proof, I suppose. And that's one of the reasons why obviously there's a considerable expense going into this one, but I don't think I'll sell it. I don't need to. There's no sailing that I could go and want to do that would require me to buy a different boat, because this would do it. And that was part of the whole reason for this boat, I think.
Cool. Brilliant. Right, next question. There's another gentleman. I'm not even going to try and pronounce your name because I'm just going to embarrass myself, but you will know the question if it was you. Great to meet the owner. So a question. Are only personal moments spent on this boat enough to make him decide to take this huge expense for the refit, or is there something else in relation to the boat? because in my opinion, if you consider the money spent and the money you could get from selling it, Contessas do keep their value high, he could have ended up with a much newer or spacious vessel. So I don't think English is your first language, but I think what you are asking there is, what was it about this particular boat, or was there something about this particular Contessa that made you want to do the refit, or what's the history of the boat? Was there something particularly special about this particular boat rather than having another Contessa?
Yeah, not really. It was just a local boat to me at the time that I happened to stumble across in a local marina. And over a few months, I tried to track down the previous owner. And when I agreed to buy the boat, the previous owner had sadly passed away, but he'd owned since 1982. So just under 40 years he'd had the boat for locally, and done quite a lot of sailing in it. And I think the family were quite keen to sell the boat to me because I had these plans for the boat, whereas I don't think they would have been particularly keen to sell to someone who was just going to let it fester in a marina somewhere and not get used. So yeah, I think I plan to send some photos to them and once finished, and I think they'll be quite pleased with it. But other than that, nothing sentimental to me really, just it happened to be in the right place at the right time.
Right, next one up, and a regular viewer and a regular commentator, Church of the Green Flip Flop. I love your name. He sent two questions. One, will you have spent more on the refit than the boat is worth when all the jobs are complete? And two, have there been any or many unexpected jobs that were added since the start of the project? Both really good questions. Both probably questions you've already worked out the answer to, which is why you're asking them. Yes and yes is my answer, but I'm going to let Jamie answer whilst I go and grab my coffee.
Yes, I will have spent more than the boat is worth, but hopefully not too much more. I think someone else mentioned that these boats do tend to keep their value a little bit, which is helpful. So that's one argument for restoring something old of this calibre of boat, I think. And then also, I suppose people have different definitions of worth or value. So yes, monetary wise, there's undoubtedly going to have spent more than it's worth, but if you then gain experiences, or it enables you to go off and see the world or meet new people, or define worth or value, I guess depends how you look at it. But in some ways it's also not about the money. I think it's quite nice to restore something old, because over time less and less things do get restored, and then it sounds weird, but it's almost a bit of history that you're preserving, I suppose, which is quite nice. And I do quite like old things. So in some ways I could give you a load of reasons why, and in other ways I could kind of go, don't really know why, just
because it's a nice thing to do, maybe. Yeah, I mean, when you take on a refit, I think most people are sensible enough to know that if you're doing a big refit, and you put, say, £50,000 or £100,000 into your boat's not suddenly going to be worth £50,000 or £100,000 more, but you're doing it for the enjoyment, you're doing it for the benefit that you're going to get down the line. Yes, the boat is going to have increased in value. It obviously is going to be a much nicer, much better, much more valuable boat, and we're going to get the boat surveyed when the process is finished, just to make sure that Jamie can get insurance for the appropriate value of the boat. But if Jamie keeps this boat 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, how do you put a value on the enjoyment that you're going to have from having a boat that is working as you want it to be, and pretty and nice and a pleasant place to be? And
that's it. No one buys a boat for an investment in terms of monetary value or return. It's just not a thing, is it?
The second part of the question was, have there been many or any unexpected jobs that were added since the start of the project? So Jamie contacted me whilst I was away cruising. I was in the Caribbean, I think, and initially I kind of said, well, look, I'm away. If you want your boat done, obviously can't do it because I'm not here. But as it worked out, because of another boatyard to some extent not being as quick as Jamie would have liked to get on with the works, he ended up sticking it on truck and bringing it down to me and basically gave me a list, and these are the things that I want done. There have been one or two additional things. So what I always do when a boat arrives with me is I effectively do a kind of like a mini survey on the boat, and I'll go through the list the owner has given. Sometimes I will go and visit a boat if it's a big project prior to it being brought to me, whether it's brought by road or by sea. Sometimes it can be worth me doing a kind of preliminary visit. But in this case I didn't, because it got shipped to me. And I went through Jamie's list and kind of went, yeah, that's all fine, whatever. But also then made my own list. And at this point, I'll let Jamie take up the story about where we are.
Yeah, so the list kind of grew a little bit, didn't it? Or a lot. But I think you'd be almost naive to expect a refit of an old boat to just be naturally it's going to grow as you kind of dig things out and find more problems or different things requiring solutions. So yeah, I think I have got a bit carried away maybe, and there were some things that I didn't anticipate doing. Osmosis treatment wasn't on the initial list, because back then I didn't really know too much because I'm new to the whole thing. Now I'd like to think that I've learned quite a lot from being down here, from watching your videos, George, as well. And now I'd be able to spot that if I went and saw a boat, I think. But yeah, that wasn't on the list, so that was quite a big job. I think your shoulders have probably just about recovered.
Just about.
And then there's always the argument that whilst this is out, you might consider doing this, and that's happened a little bit as well. But it's quite addictive.
Yeah.
And I think if you're planning to have something,
You've kind of enjoyed the process, though. I think, you know, off camera, you know, Jamie and other clients have come to me and either during or after the process, normally after, and gone, yeah, it cost me a lot of money, George, but actually it was really nice working with you. So I don't want to blow my own trumpet, but I like to think that it is a nice process, and that seems to be the feedback that I've had.
Yeah, it's nice.
But yeah, there's definitely been stuff that, you know, osmosis treatment was the big one. It turned out the bottom was very blistered, and it's just like, yeah, we sort of do need to do something with this, rather than ignore it. Just to be clear, Jamie bought the boat without getting a survey done on it. He just looked at it, looked around it, and, you know, we'll come on to the price because there's a question about that in a minute. So, so if you are buying a boat, and I think Jamie's sort of learned the lesson a little bit this time, even if it's a relatively low value boat, it is worth getting a survey done, or at the very least getting someone who is knowledgeable on boats, refits, whatever, to come and have a look at it and give it a quick once over, because it could potentially save you a lot of money or put you in a position where you still buy the boat but you're going into it with your eyes open and the ability to negotiate a price which reflects the real value of the boat and the potential costs of putting any issues that may be there right. Right, let's go on to another question. So, person called Monday School has asked the question. My question is, why not insulate with foam? Or is there no condensation issues? Thank you, appreciate your videos. I'm refitting a Ranger 32 this summer. Well, good luck with your refit. So Contessas generally didn't have any insulation at all from new. I'm not sure if it was an option then. Maybe it's an option now on new build boats. Frankly, most of the Contessas that I work on don't have insulation, and it's not really an issue. It depends what you're doing with your boat. If you're living on a boat year round, winter and summer, yeah, insulation is a really good idea because it helps stop condensation. It just reduces the amount of heating you've got to do, and so there are good reasons to do it. We haven't insulated this boat because it wasn't on the jobs list. Jamie doesn't plan to live on it. In the winter, I imagine it, like most boats, probably won't get a vast amount of use, and frankly, if it does, a dehumidifier makes a hell of a difference. So unless you're literally living on your boat in the winter, I would just go down the dehumidifier route. Unless unless you really want to insulate, it's not absolutely necessary, in my view. Does that answer the question? Hopefully. Sorry, I answered that for Jamie.
Yeah,
Perfect. Next one from Huaribard. How? Yeah, I've probably murdered that as well. Sorry. Will this be an all-electric refit? Given the advances and advantages of electric, it seems a gas engine would make everything else a big waste. Well, again, I'm going to give a view on this. I'll let Jamie give a view on it as well. So the answer is no, it's not going to be an all-electric refit. We are sticking with the diesel engine. The boat had many issues when it arrived here, but the engine wasn't one of them. It's got an older engine, but it runs absolutely fine. If you watch the earlier videos in the series, I've had the engine out, stuck it in the workshop, gave it a service, I've run it up, descaled it, touched up a bit of paint on it, but having sat for 2 years, press the button, it just started and went. So there was not really any need to change the engine unless the owner wanted something newer. It's not a pile of rust. It starts easily, it runs easily. There doesn't appear to be any issues. So I didn't really see any point in throwing away a perfectly good engine, and Jamie was kind of the same opinion. You've said the advantages and advances in all electric. Yes, I agree. There have definitely been advances in electric propulsion. I've been looking at it quite closely related to another project I'm involved in that may go electric. The advantages, yes, there are definitely advantages, but there are also significant disadvantages to going all electric. Depends on your use case, I would say. For certain people who want to use their boats with relatively short range or local sailing, definitely electric can be a really, really good option. If you're going off on longer travels, I know people can and do go off sailing on long distance cruises with only electric drive. And there are some well-known YouTubers that also do that, but there's an awful lot more that use diesel engines, and it is a compromise. There is a degree of range anxiety and range issue with doing long distance cruising with electric drive, in my opinion. And speaking to people that have done it, there is always the case of, yeah, we have to go really, really slowly sometimes, because if we go fast, it pulls the batteries down too quickly, and we've only got so much solar, and there's only so much solar you can put on any boat. Another option is, having electric drive, but then having like a diesel generator or a petrol generator to have some sort of hybrid solution, which I think actually is a really good option, but it's also quite a complicated option because you've got the electric drive and you've got to plumb in a diesel engine anyway. So yeah, it can be a good option, but not on a boat of this size. But right, I'll shut up. Jamie, why haven't you gone full electric? Or you just go, all the reasons George said.
Yeah, basically what George said. But no, I think there's also, in addition to that, I think there's an argument for keeping the boat original, and in keeping with the area that it's from. Yeah, I think that's the main one, really.
Right.
And also, I don't feel there's been enough, perhaps research isn't the right word, but I don't feel like it's a big enough thing yet to make a decision based on what's available now. Perhaps in 5 or 10 years' time there'll be more reliable options, or it'll become obvious which is good and which isn't good, or I don't know. But mainly I think it's quite nice to keep it original and have a diesel engine in there.
Yeah. I mean, it is becoming more popular, definitely, but it is perhaps not as popular as if you watch an awful lot of YouTube. It's not perhaps as popular and as commonplace as you might expect if you just watch a lot of YouTube. In the real world, you come across electric drive engines very infrequently, particularly on boats that are perhaps going off and doing long distance cruising. I'm not suggesting that's what Jamie's going to do, but it's not a commonplace thing. But who knows? 5-10 years down the line, it is definitely growing in popularity. That may be a thing, but for now, the boat came with a good engine. Purely from a green perspective, why would you want to throw something out which is being manufactured and all the costs of the ecological costs have gone into that? Why throw that out and then chuck a whole load of lithium in, which has to be mined, and then battery controllers and a new electric motor and all that sort of stuff? So I think the green issue, I'm not saying it's a red herring, but I think there are a lot of people who are changing from diesel. Oh, this is going to turn into a rant. There's a lot of people that are changing their boats over from diesel to electric drive for green issues, and I'm not entirely convinced that they are as green as the owners of the boat would perhaps like if you put into the full life cost of the solution you're putting in. However, what I would say is refitting old boats is definitely 100% a better ecological and greener thing to do than going out and buying a new one, for sure. I don't care about all these modern resins that you can buy, which are kind of biodegradable and reusable. I think you can melt down some modern boat production resins and potentially reuse them. You certainly can't do that with 1970s boats, so I think there's a lot to be said for the ecological and green aspects of refitting an old boat and keeping it going for another 50 years than going off and buying a brand new one that's come out of a factory, which won't last as long because modern boats are not as well built as the old ones are. Right. Next question is, well, it's not really a question. Finally, a concise video. Thank you, Anthony Yelas. Yeah, sorry, I do know I harp on a bit, but it's just the nature of how I work and like to explain things. So, did the owner consider an electric motor instead of diesel from excess chipper? Well, we've kind of already talked about that, so refer you to the earlier comments, but thank you for the question. What was the original purchase price of the boat, Jamie? In 1976.
In 1976.
I don't think that's what the guy is asking. SS Rooster. But in 1976, it was probably 8,000, 9,000, maybe something like that, based on my knowledge of what they were.
Yeah.
Because you said in 1971 they were.
In 1971 they were 5,850. I think. So by 1976.
Yeah, I think they were probably 7, 8, 9 grand new back then, which was about the price of a small house, I believe, around that same time. So comparably, if you compare a new Contessa now to a new house now, it's actually comparable, interestingly. But I suspect the gentleman, I assume you're a gentleman, actually means what did you buy the boat for when you bought it in 2021?
Yeah, so I paid 17,500 for the boat in 2021.
What was it advertised for?
It wasn't advertised. It wasn't openly for sale. It was only my investigation by walking up and down the pontoon for months on end to try and find the owner.
Yeah.
And someone that I work with actually used to work in the harbours, so he kind of knew who owned the boat, so put me in touch, and it kind of just happened really randomly. So it wasn't actually for sale on the market. It was just a conversation with them. Cool. Yeah, out of the blue.
Great. Next question from Good Q. Good Q. How did you find the Solent Boat Butler? How did you find the Solent Boat Butler, Jamie?
That is a good question.
I didn't have a YouTube then. No, oh, maybe I did. Maybe it was a sailing one.
It wasn't through YouTube, but I think going back to briefly to touch on the reasons for buying a Contessa, definitely the Owners Association and the Facebook page had quite a big influence in my decision, because there was so much resource available, so many people who still sail them. They still get built, you can ring the yard up, but it's such a good and useful resource that actually played quite a large part in the decision process as well. And I think from memory what happened is I spent weeks and weeks and weeks just reading the whole Facebook page and I think that's how I came across your work, because you were posting some stuff on there.
Yeah.
And I think that's how I decided, right, that's who I'm going to get in touch with, because obviously it's all very nice work. So I think that's how it happened. And then I think we exchanged a few emails when you were away, before I'd even bought the boat, when we had a look the other day.
Oh yeah, when you were looking at the Swan. Yeah, we exchanged emails. Yeah.
And then sort of 6-7 months later, I finally found a Contessa, and that was that really.
I'm going to add a question. And has it? Am I allowed to ask? Has it been a nice experience?
Yeah, it's been lovely actually. It has been really, really enjoyable. I think the benefits of using.
Sorry, carry on.
I think the benefits of using a small business, when it's one person putting their heart and soul into the work they do, means you get much more personal service than if you were to use a generic boatyard. I think I, like George, own and run a business, so I know how much effort and how much heart and soul you've got to put into the work that you do. And for that reason, I think if I had to refit another boat at some point, I'd be knocking on George's door again.
I'm busy, mate. I'm sorry. I'm busy.
He doesn't want to know anymore. But no, it's been a really pleasant experience. And I think, to start with, when you asked about what my thoughts were on featuring on your relatively new YouTube channel, I was quite excited by that as well. Because it's quite nice to have a refit documented. But also with like constant updates and photos, and it's just been really enjoyable, to be honest. Yeah, really good.
Cool. Thank you, mate. Appreciate it. Checks in the post. So next question is spending all the money it takes for this refit really worth it? Well, some people responded to that in the comments of your comment, basically saying it's a Contessa, obviously it's worth it. But that might be, I don't know, a tongue-in-cheek. It depends whether you're a Contessa fan or not. We've kind of already answered this question quite a bit. My view obviously is, yes, if it's the boat you want, then go for it. Obviously I'm going to say that because I'm benefiting from it, because it's my business that's doing the refit. But even if it wasn't my benefit, you know, if it's the boat you want and if it's the boat you're going to keep for some time, then yeah, of course it's worth it, because you're investing money in something that you're going to get enjoyment out of. And I do very much believe in refitting old boats rather than going out and buying new boats. Nothing against that. It's great for the industry that new boats are being built. But from the green point of view, then I think it's there's a lot to be said for refitting old boats.
I think that people have said, we've kind of touched on it, but when people say, you could go and buy a large, newer, plastic kind of cruising boat and have lots more space, but it's not necessarily about having the biggest thing that you can afford. It's about what you quite like and what you want out of it. It doesn't have to be the biggest and newest. So yeah, value and how worthwhile it is subjective, I guess.
Right, we're getting through the questions. We've got a few more that we're going to go into. So the old guy commented on the short video I put up saying, the money question, I think it would be interesting to know ballpark cost, materials and labour. Also, I think I heard you say these boats could probably be bought new. Any dollar numbers for a new boat? So I specifically haven't necessarily talked about the cost in detail out of respect to Jamie, because, you know, as a private matter, and it's up to Jamie if he wants to talk about it or not. No pressure, that's fine. But ballpark wise, let's talk about buying a Contessa specifically. So yes, you can buy them cheaply if you want to. You can pick them up for even as low as £5,000 or £10,000 for a complete basket case. That needs a lot of work. And I've bought one recently. I've got one at the back of the yard over there, which I kind of accidentally bought, and it's a refit project, which I'm not entirely sure yet what I'm going to do with, but it may end up being on this channel, who knows. For moving up the price range, you know, for £25,000 you should be buying quite a nice usable boat that's on the water. Everything kind of works. It might be tired in places, it might likely have a few issues that need to be resolved, but it should be usable. but maybe a bit tired in some areas. When you get up to kind of 35, 40,000 pounds, you should be looking at buying a really quite nice, well sorted boat. 50,000 pounds, a very nicely sorted boat. It might still need bits and bobs doing, but it should be, you know, pretty good. Yes, you can buy new ones. So I think, don't quote me on this, I think the base price for a brand new Contessa 32 is around 275 to 300,000 pounds. I think you need to add the VAT onto that, and you probably need to then add whatever options you want on top of that. Yeah, you know what, sounds like quite a lot of money when you just say it out like that, but actually if you compare it against other comparable boats which are hand built to a very high standard, it's actually very comparable to other boat builders that are building quality, low volume boats. So that's the cost-wise. In terms of refit costs, the sky is the limit. Not talking specifically about this boat, but you know, it's very easy to buy a boat which is 25,000 pounds and put 50 or 100 or even 150,000 pounds into it, depending on what you want done and what issues there are with the boat and what level you want to get it to. And some people might choose to do a refit over a number of years. They might come to me and say, okay, we want this package of work done this winter or this refit, and then I'm going to go sail the boat a bit and see what else I want to get done. Then I'll bring it back to you the following year with another maybe shorter or bigger list depending on what I find. So there's different ways to skin a cat. Do you want to talk about numbers at all, Jamie? No pressure. If you don't want to, you don't have to.
I'm not totally against the idea. Perhaps when it's all finished, if there is enough interest or people are genuinely interested to kind of work out their own costs or whether it's something that they would like to do, if there is enough genuine interest, then I don't mind talking about it. So yeah, let us know in the comments. That's what you say, isn't it?
Let us know in the comments. Do you want to know how much it costs? You've got to persuade Jamie to open up his magic spreadsheet.
And I think it's because I was quite new to it as well. You know, as I've said before, I have got carried away. And it's sometimes quite difficult being a perfectionist because it can be a double-edged sword. It can be a great trait to have, but also it's a bit of a, whether that's boat refitting or work or business or whatever it is, it can go two ways.
Yeah.
But yeah, if it's helpful for people to kind of run through what was bought, what was paid for X, Y, and Z, and would I do anything different or would I change things, then yeah, if there's enough interest.
Right, well, we will see. Right, Badgers update. Thank you for your comment. Is this your forever boat? And if so, what would George have had to have said to put you off the refit? Is this your forever boat? Let's start with that.
I don't anticipate selling it.
There we go. That answers the question. So, you know, as far as you know, it's highly likely this will be a forever boat, or certainly a very long
I think
ownership.
so. I think so. I think even if I was to have another boat at some point in the future, if I could get away with not selling this one, then I would. Because I think it's quite easy to get. I feel fairly attached to it, and I'm not really. I've sailed it a couple of times, getting it here or transporting it, but I think then when you start using it and going places and creating memories in it, then it's going to be even trickier to kind of detach from it, I guess.
Yeah. What would George have had to have said to put you off the refit? Oh, you had your heart set on it, really, didn't you?
Yeah, pretty much. To be honest, you've said everything. You've said so many things I've gone off. Bloody hell. Like osmosis thing, and then but once you've kind of once you've started the process, you can't really back out halfway through, can you? And you wouldn't want to either, because you've decided, I've decided that's what I want. So it's just one of those things you've just got to roll with. But I think that's what the comment. I think that's what it means.
Okay, so next question, because we've been talking for a long time. From R. and Randalom, I think. Sorry about that if I pronounced it wrong. What was the condition of Lottie typical of that age of Contessa, and what are the plans of the owner? So, was it typical? Not really. I would say that Lottie was bought in pretty tired condition, to be honest with you. But you know, these are all our boats. They started building Contessa 32s in 1971, so you can buy them in everything from very, very, very tired condition all the way up to spectacular, almost new condition, because they've either been fantastically looked after in their whole life or have been subject to refit or refits. So no, I wouldn't say this necessarily is typical, but some of the works that needed doing were fairly common. I would say. So, you know, things like repairing some of the failed bonding in some of the areas, because I've worked on these boats so much, I know where they tend to fail. So, you know, I can normally go straight to those areas and go, oh, okay, this needs doing or not. And what was nice is I could get on this boat, and whilst it was very, very tired when I got onto it, I kind of looked around it and went, yeah, it's old, but it's actually not been abused, this boat. This isn't a boat that's been smashed around the race course or been in a lot of accidents or whatever. Yes, there was some evidence of some damage in some areas once you start peeling away the layers of the onion. But on the whole, I mean, like all this woodwork that you can see behind me, which has all been stripped and ready for revarnishing, it's all in really good condition. It was just old and it just needed kind of just beautification and prettifying. That's my view. I don't know if Jamie has anything to add to that, possibly not, because I know Contessa's more than...
Yeah.
What are the plans of the owner? Let's so part two. What are the plans of the owner?
A mixture really. A mixture, I would say, between a little bit of racing maybe and longer distance cruising. And again, that's another reason, going back slightly to the previous question, is it's capable of doing both. A lot of people still race them competitively. There's quite a big fleet that still race locally, and lots of people do lots of cool and interesting things in them, and it's I think that they'll continue to do so because of the history of them. So yeah, a mixed use, I think.
Cool. Nearly there. Russ King 63. Old boat versus new boat. How would you describe the main differences, and why did you choose an older boat over a newer one? We've kind of talked about that a little bit, but do you want to say anything on old boat versus new boat? The heart wants what the heart wants,
well,
I guess.
Yeah.
Ultimately, you know, I think that's just a personal preference thing. Nothing against people who want a new boat, whether it's a new boat in an old style or a new boat in a modern style. You know, it's horses for courses, different strokes for different folks. So,
yeah, I think you're drawn to what you're drawn to, really.
Yeah. And you were looking at, like you said earlier, you were looking at more traditional, kind of classic, shaped, older designs, because that's what you were drawn to.
Yeah, they are pretty.
You know, why do some men like blondes and some men like brunettes? Just what you like, you know. Variety is the spice of life as well. So the last question is from SV Reborn. Thank you very much for sending this in. There are 3 parts to his question, but we'll start with what does he do for a living? What do you do for a living, Jamie?
So I own and run a holiday cottage company with my mate John, which
is called
Island Escapes.
So I'll put a link in the description if you're thinking of going to the island of Isle of Man. The island of Isle of Man. If you want to go to the Isle of Man, go and have a look at the Island Escapes website, and Jamie will help you rent a holiday cottage.
Pretty much, that's what we do. We've got a good team of people. Keeps us all very busy, and it's good fun. And what was the other part of the question?
So part 2 of the question was, how long were you thinking about buying a boat before you bought this boat?
It's something I've always fancied doing, but never really got round to or had the opportunity to do. And I did a dinghy sailing course during COVID. So back on the Isle of Man, we were actually lucky enough to have eradicated COVID for a while and shut the borders. So I did a dinghy sailing course then, and decided that I loved it so much that I was going to learn to sail and buy a boat, and that's pretty much what happened. Some would say that I've kind of jumped in it with 2 feet, straight into the deep end, but I think sometimes that's the best way to go and just get on with it. So yeah, I've been thinking about it for a while, and then just went for it.
Cool. And last question from SVV Marbles is: do you know anything of DIY? I mean, you've helped me a bit on occasion, so a little bit.
Helping's probably a kind way of putting it. I know more than I did before I started coming down here and watching George's videos and trying to lend a hand.
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, you're a busy guy running your business. My business is refitting boats, so you know, I'm really happy that you've asked me to do the work, because you haven't really probably had the time or the skills or the knowledge. But I'm really, really happy to do some of that knowledge transfer with owners, with people. That's why I run the channel to some extent, because yeah, it's great advertising for my business. It's a bit of fun making the videos, but do you know what, I really like to support people who want to refit their own boats, because that's what I've had to do with my boats all my life. My first boat was a 4-knot shitbox that I bought for £3,500, and it had a rotten bulkhead at the forward of it, a rotten mast step, and it was an absolute heap of junk, to be quite honest with you. But I loved it. I learnt a lot from it. I put a bit of myself into that boat and made it a lot nicer, sailed it for a number of years and then sold it and bought something bigger. And for a lot of people, that is a great way to get into sailing, a great way to get better at learning about boats. And I fully support people that want to come into yachting, or have to come into yachting for whatever reason financially, at a lower level, and you build and grow your skills both in sailing and boat maintenance. So so hopefully people get a lot from my videos, and all I'd say is, if you're unsure about doing a job, ask help, but don't be frightened of necessarily doing it. But do go online, do ask in a boatyard, do ask me. I do consultancy services, and you know, don't be frightened of tackling a job, because if you're reasonably practical, you'll be surprised at how far you can actually go if you have the time. But do not underestimate how long a refit or a project will work, because old boats, you never know quite what you're going to find.
I think that part of the reason I've quite enjoyed coming down and trying to do little jobs is just to kind of put myself in your shoes for a few hours, really. And it's surprising how something so simple as ripping a toilet out, trying to get 4 bolts or 4 screws out of the base of the toilet took me about half an hour, because it's awkward. Or when we were trying to get these original U-bolts out, that took forever. It is quite surprising, and it's knackering as well. So I don't know how you do it all day, every day.
Right, well, that's all the questions. Huge thank you to Jamie, who is a really nice chap. I'm so pleased that he's brought his boat to me, because I've got a really great client, but I've actually got a really good mate out of it as well, actually, I feel, which is just like a result all round. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you, Jamie, for answering all the questions. I suspect strongly you will see Jamie again on this channel, either on this boat or possibly on my own boat. We shall see, or maybe on a completely different boat. Who knows? I expect we'll get lots of views, because he's much better looking than I am. And thanks again. See you next time. Hope you enjoyed that. Bye for now. Bye bye.